from there. Okay. So welcome everyone to Your News Biz. My name is James Briner, and I like to say that each time, it's another day of opportunity. And today our opportunity is to talk with Natalie Van Hooser. She's our special guest. She's a journalist and she's bilingual, English, Spanish, and we'll want to talk about that a little bit. You worked in public radio in Nevada, if I'm not mistaken, it's Nevada, and you've done translation work for various journalism organizations, and you've just been named community manager for Lion, which is the local independent online news publishers, which that's a very large organization. Most of those organizations are for profit, if I'm not mistaken. A few of them are nonprofit. Also, probably most importantly, this is how we got to know each other. You're an ambassador for Sembra Media, which we help independent media in Latin America, Spanish language media. Tell us about your career. I wanted to have our viewers and listeners get a sense of how it is these days for a young person coming out of journalism school or working, just starting in media. How do you build a career? I think you've done an interesting job of it. So why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, that's always one of my favorite things to talk about. So thank you for inviting me to have this conversation. And you can hear me just fine. Everything sounds
Perfect.
good?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, the first thing I always love to mention to journalism students when I go speak to classes is to definitely value any experience you can get working in local news. While you're in journalism school, when you look for opportunities once you graduate, that's really how I got my start. When I was at the Reynolds School of Journalism at the University of Nevada, Reno, a student newsroom started in my second year in journalism school called Noticiero Móvil, which is a faculty-run student bilingual newsroom for English and Spanish reporting at the journalism school. And so I was double majoring in journalism and Spanish, and I had just enough Spanish that I was able to go out and do those interviews and then really work with my classmates who had complementary skills. Their conversational Spanish was excellent. And then I had some of the grammar and vocabulary from studying the language that we needed to produce our reporting. So I took that experience and then did more internships with our local NPR station, KUNR Public Radio. And I found my way back there, but at the time, I was doing bilingual reporting for them, focused on different topics related to immigration and politics. This was, around 2016, 2018, that time frame. So that's just one example of, something I love to tell other younger journalists is that you don't wait till you have what you think is the perfect skill set to go out and apply for opportunities, whether it's an internship or a grant project, or when you get to applying for your first job. Journalism is really about what you can do when you apply yourself. And so that's just one example of I started doing all that production and all that work and reporting before I'd even graduated from college.
Yeah, so that journalism school must have been pretty good. Any particular professors who you learned a lot from, or anything in particular that any of them you want to point out?
Yeah, I think the professors who I worked with the most closely really supported my passion and my desire to get to that production as soon as I could. Some of them, like the founder of the Noticiero Móvil student newsroom, Vanessa Vancour, founded at the time, is not with the journalism school now, but really supported, how can we pair students up who have that passion to do bilingual reporting so that they can get it produced even if they don't have all of the skills themselves yet. So having a professor who was supportive and an ally in that regard, especially for someone like me who is coming into the bilingual reporting space, wanting to be an ally for all of my Latina and Latino colleagues, someone who recognized the intention that I had, wanting to be in this space to support my colleagues and better understand all of the cultures that come with working in Spanish was really helpful. And then I had some other professors who really, gave a lot of inspiration when it comes to doing international reporting and supported me as I, pitched projects where I was working with a colleague in Mexico City in order to tell a story about a young man who had followed his father to Mexico when his father was deported from Nevada. So I received this support from those professors to help, figure out how to make these ambitious ideas that I had a reality for doing international reporting from Reno as a student.
Yeah, very interesting. I think at one point, you and I talked about some reporting you did on the border economy. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but there's a very significant economy based on all communities along the border in the United States and in Mexico. And there's so much interchange that's going on. And I think you've done some reporting on that, if I'm not mistaken.
I think maybe that was with somebody else, but I have done more border related work with my work at the International Center for Journalists, which is what I did when I graduated. And I'd love to talk a little bit about how students can keep, media support and program management in mind as part of their skill set. And that took me to the border.
Okay, so the International Center for Journalists, another organization that I love. They've supported my work in Latin America over the years. So tell us a little bit about that experience, what exactly you were doing.
Yeah, so when I graduated, even though I got this start in reporting and content production, especially bilingually, before I'd ever graduated, when I actually did graduate, I ended up not working as a full-time journalist as my first job. I was a program assistant at the International Center for Journalists in Washington, D.C., and I worked with the Knight Fellows Department, and then I moved over to their Latin American programming. And with that, I'm always looking for roles that allow me to keep furthering learning the Spanish language and about all of the cultures that come with it. So with that work, I specifically worked on projects that supported Mexican journalists on the Mexico side of the U.S.-Mexico border, organizing investigations and trainings and, organizing how to evaluate journalists for scholarships and grants and things like that. So I ended up in this space where I also find myself in other organizations like with Sember Media and then some of my more recent work where I'm always looking for places that are a hub for lots of different journalists, because then I'm going to meet a lot of these people and learn so much from them when they come across my path. And that's exactly what happened with ICFJ. I got to meet a lot of Latin American journalists, especially in Mexico and the Dominican Republic, through that program management work, which has gone on to serve me well as an independent journalist once the pandemic hit.
So tell us a little bit about Lion. How big is the organization? What do they do? What do you do with them and so forth?
Yeah, so I am there. I'm in my third week now with Lion. I'm one of their new staff members, and I am the new community manager. So I am working really closely with the rest of the membership and coaching team to support the over 500 media organizations or publishers that are local, independent, online publishers that are part of the Lion community. And so my role is to, get to know all of these organizations well and figure out what support they need from Lion when it comes to independent media sustainability. That's where we fit into their support world, is how can we help them, do a sustainability audit, figure out what they need to in order to continue on as an independent media organization. How can they learn from other members of Lion is a large part of my role. I'm working on very soon we're launching our community ambassadors program for this year, where Lion members sign up to run a cohort on a topic that they propose, where they're then facilitating mutual learning with other Lion members who are part of that group. So that's really where I fit into what Lion is doing, is how am I helping to support the members and get them more connected with each other, find that sense of community.
Yeah. Well, that organization is really necessary these days, because journalism, which used to be a pretty good business, is not a very good business anymore. And it's interesting to see how various media organizations are mixing the idea of subscriptions or community support through memberships, or whatever they want to call it, where individual users or consumers of media are contributing to a media organization so that they can get local news that otherwise they wouldn't be able to get. What are some of the more interesting things that you've seen so far? Any particular organization that you've come across that you think has a interesting, innovative way of generating revenue? Anyone in particular? I imagine there's a lot of them. Maybe hard to pick.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm definitely getting to know them better. So I know as I go along, I'll have more examples for you. Right now, it's not so much related to revenue generation, but as far as like how independent media are filling a void in some news gaps that we're seeing. Lion members that have been reporting on, well, for bilingual communities, Spanish-speaking audiences, and immigrant communities, I'm seeing are stepping up to really provide some guidance and support to local media that are looking at how they can cover what is unfolding this month of January here in 2025, as far as how to more effectively serve their immigrant communities and, how to tackle things like reporting on raids and things like that. So that's the main thing I've noticed so far.
I think I saw a number of organizations that serve indigenous communities, particularly in Canada, that are members of Lion or are working with Lion. Any examples from those organizations that you've seen so far?
I know that we're working on, expanding the community in Canada, and we're doing a big push for that right now. So I don't have a lot of examples that come to mind right now, except that we're looking to build out that community more this year.
All right. Well, we have to talk about what's going on in the world of grants and how that might affect your work and Lion's work. You've been on the job how long now?
This is week 3, the start of week 3. Yeah.
Okay. So there may have been some conversation at Lion about the possible impacts of reduced grants, and we just saw, I think it was this week, an announcement that the United States government, which is the biggest grant maker in the world, is paused all grants. Is that affecting Lion at all, or any other organizations that you're working with? What have you heard?
Yeah, and this is also new. I think everyone's trying to figure out what it means. For the most part, with my work at Lion, it's not impacting our community as much, because so many local independent publishers really make sure to not, utilize funding that is linked to federal funds. So I know that's something where different, independent publishers will come down differently on how they feel about that. There are some that are using it with Lion's community. But what I'm seeing more is through my work with Semper Media as the U.S. ambassador, and all the implications that are coming with, especially like USAID funding being frozen. and all of the different media support for international projects that is just, currently on hold right now. And that includes, projects that benefit the bilingual media community here, independent bilingual community through Sember Media that way. So it's more the international implications of those grants that everyone is figuring out what to do. And it just brings up something that we really emphasize at Sember Media and at Lion as far as the importance of diversifying one's funding model when it comes to being an independent media outlet, right? If you have funding like that that's supporting a large part of your work and then it's just overnight, it's frozen, that can be really impactful for the organization.
Yeah. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rank yourself as a person skilled in technology? Where would you, and the reason I ask you this question is in the area of career advancement, for people who are trying to figure out what do I need to do to advance in my career. How would you rank yourself in terms of, well, just natural technical ability and two different things, your natural inclination and then also where you are now? How would you rate yourself?
Yeah, I think I would define myself as a troubleshooter. So I am the person who loves to try technology and do a test run and find people to answer my questions. And that's how I've pretty much developed a multimedia skill set, including a lot of work virtually, but pre-pandemic, I really looked at how to do video as well as audio and photography with my work. And I would find those very generous classmates or professors who would take the time to go through things that I didn't understand well, but I was determined to do it on my own. So that's kind of how I approach things. When the pandemic hit, a lot of my work, especially with the radio station, ended up being streaming, sessions, Facebook Live events in Spanish to inform the community about different things related to COVID, whether it was vaccinations to school reopenings. And my team and I had to figure out how to do those live streams ourselves, how to test it when we were all in our different places, working remotely in that lockdown phase. So I've figured out a lot of technology things the hard way, but just giving myself plenty of time to test it out, recorded online classes, things like that.
Well, you mentioned video. Of course, that's the big rage right now. What advice does Lion use? Short video, TikTok? Are you going to be trying to produce stuff for TikTok or YouTube in your new job?
Yeah, I think at Lion, we are looking at how it makes sense for us to get more into that space. And I think some of it is really wanting to strategize what we can record in person when we have things like our summit, our conference for the year. What can we record when we have members in this in-person space? Since that's always the balance with video projects these days when we're not in the same place. With Sember Media, we've done quite a few different video experiments related to if we get our different members of the Sember Media directory of independent Spanish language media here in the U.S. and Mexico, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, all of our region. We invite our members to record short social media videos, and then we've edited those together to do short social videos of, tips for media entrepreneurs and things like that. So that's always the balance these days. What do you have people self-record, and what do you strategize to record all when you're together?
Oh. Well, a lot of people think you have to have a big, expensive studio and lighting and so forth, but that's not true anymore. What about your experience with that?
Yeah, I definitely have gone the low tech route. It's a lot more for me coming from radio. I know the importance of having high quality audio with video. And if your audio is low quality, then the video can only be so good. And with the videos themselves, you need a certain quality of recording device, of camera, lenses. But a lot of the time just comes down to your setup and making sure you have really good lighting And a lot of that can just be from natural light. So I've always erred on the side of, being minimalist as far as like the equipment I need and the setup that I need, but just making sure that I've got those fundamentals down.
So what's in your bag
Yeah, I use,
when you go out
yeah.
on an assignment? What's in your bag?
Yeah, if I'm recording video, it's been on my phone and my laptop. I have pretty decent camera on my laptop, making sure that I'm getting that high quality audio with an external microphone. That's always pretty key. And then for radio, I have my own audio recorder. So I'm not recording for the radio from my phone recorder, but I do have a separate one for that.
Uh, what is that recorder? Just for all the tech geeks
Yeah.
who might
It's
be
a
listening.
Zoom. It's the Zoom's like the video conferencing platform, but it's an audio recorder with the same name. It's a Zoom H4.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
All
that's the
right.
one I
So
use.
all you tech geeks out there, take note of that. Okay. Um, what questions do you have for me? Anything about what's going on in media?
Yeah, I think just kind of flipping the interviewing back over to you for other people who are, early career, but looking more at this independent style of journalism. It's something that I fell into just by working, finding independent media that I wanted to get to know better, and then needing to be independently employed as necessity at the beginning of the pandemic. And what I have noticed is that a lot of the time still in journalism school, being an entrepreneur, a media entrepreneur, being an independent journalist, except isn't taught as much in journalism schools. There's mentions of doing freelance work, like one-off projects where you might get paid by organizations when you pitch to them. But as someone who has studied independent journalism, entrepreneurial journalism for a long time, what would your advice be to people entering the workforce and interested in that?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. Well, at the University of Navarra in Spain, I was there for 7 years, and I developed some courses where the students had to develop their own independent news project, and they could do it in whatever format they wanted. They could do a text, or they could do blogs, they could do videos, they could produce a movie if they wanted to, they could work in groups, they could work separately, whatever, but they had to do something. The advice I would give students there, and I think it's still the advice I give to journalists, is, especially while you're in school, develop a portfolio of work. Use your classroom work as an opportunity to build your portfolio of, either, if you're good at research and writing, produce that and put it on a blog, or produce it somewhere. Get your work out there. It's very important that you be producing something and that you have something to show. You need a portfolio. And that could also be, again, it could be videos, it could be audio reports, whatever it is that you feel like you're good at, and that you enjoy, especially if it's something, it may be even something very, very narrow and way out there. When I started teaching at the University of Navarra, TikTok was considered way below the attentions of university students. They thought it was for little kids. They, disregarded it, made fun of it. But gradually over the time, by the time I left a few years ago, more than half my students were using TikTok, enjoying TikTok, that kind of thing. So the technology can change. So the other piece that I would teach was the importance of ethical production. That you make every effort to get the most accurate, honest, fair product that you can, so that it can withstand criticism, And, obviously sometimes there is, if you're trying to make a point, you're going to make a point. So it might argue for one position or another, but make sure that all the information you gather, that the data that you gather, that the interviews you do are honest, fair, and accurate, as accurate as possible. So those would be the main things.
Yeah, and just to add on to that idea, because it's another thing I really like to bring up for early career journalists, is um, also related to how I got into community engagement work. And as a student, to make sure that I was, being accurate and fair and representing things, as precisely as I could, I just kind of instinctively wanted to make sure I shared that reporting back out with the people who I featured in it, whether it was local day laborers or Latina business owners, and to get their honest feedback on what did you think of this story. I'm not fishing for a compliment here, but I
Right.
want to know how you feel you were portrayed in the story. Same thing with the reporting I did with people who decided to return to Mexico to follow their families if they did not have legal status here in the U.S. I wanted to know how they felt about how I reported about them and with them, and I really took that feedback to heart to further my reporting going forward. And then that has really surfaced again in my work the past almost 5 years when I was independently employed. I was doing community engagement or community-centered reporting for the radio station and with the Spanish language fact-checking organization Factchequeado. And so much about that is related to that feedback loop, starting the reporting process by asking the community and your audience and the people that you are trying to inform what they need to know, what their questions are, what their concerns are, having that inform the reporting, but then also sharing that reporting back with them to let them know that their time and their effort, whether it was submitting questions or getting interviewed by you, was really worthwhile. And so that fits, with how you go about finding what's accurate, what's a good way to represent things fairly.
Yeah. And what you say also indicates a change in the way that news media, I believe local news media need to be looking at their news agenda. And the news agenda that comes from Washington, New York, Los Angeles, Hollywood, those places, those media centers, it's all about the same stuff. Everybody is writing the same stuff about the same people, the same events. And one of the things that I was encouraging, and not only among students, but among independent media generally, is find a niche that nobody else is paying attention to, but that you can really cover in depth and, online with the mention of community, build a community that's either of geographical interest, shared geographical interest, shared political interest of that particular community, or shared thematically. One group of students I had in Spain put together a basically young people's news, basically young people's version of here's what's going on in Europe right now with trade or tariffs or immigration. And what we're hearing from the major media is this, but we want to know about this, this, and this. How does it affect us? How does it affect our careers? How does it affect our social lives? How does it affect our ability to move cross-border and get jobs and so forth? And they did a great job. I was very impressed. And they continued it for a while. I don't know if it's still going, but I thought it was a great idea. And again, it goes back to your mention of community and the importance of getting down to the grassroots. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Yes, yeah, and a lot of my work the past, 4 or 5 years related to how to apply that idea to election reporting so that we get away from horse race coverage, and we're reporting on election topics and creating voter guides based on what community members need to know or have questions about. So it really, informed me now going into my new role as the community manager at Lion, applying all those same ideas. How do we listen first? How do we get community members answering each other's questions? Media publishers answering each other's questions. How do we build that sense so that people have that trust and they come back to us?
If we could, this is a topic that always embarrasses people, money. Have you ever been in a position where you were offered a job, and you, turned it down because it wasn't enough money?
In a way, I mean, that's the last 4 or 5 years being independently employed. That's basically the decision that I made, multiple times, was to keep working with a portfolio style contract model as opposed to going with one full-time job. And part of that was, if the salary was competitive, if it could cover my costs, but also just I found that the mixture of things that I was doing, I found more enjoyable than just picking any one of those things. And all of my work ended up complementing and supporting my other roles. So, that's why I chose to be independently employed, even though at the end of the day, most of the time when you're independently employed, you're not making more money than you would in one full-time job, but there were the other benefits.
Well, yeah, it's precarious, but you have freedom, as it were.
Yeah, and with the diversity of clients, in a way, I ended up being more stable than if I'd been with just one, because, I had friends who were laid off from their one full-time job, whereas, if you have 4 or 5, steady clients, if one of them, something happens to them, then you're still moving right along. So I learned a lot working from that model, from the pandemic until now.
Well, Natalie, thank you very much for sharing all your insights. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, let me just make sure. I always make a list of things that I would love to talk about with an opportunity like this. So I'm just checking my notes here as a good journalist, but we covered most of it, including building your digital portfolio much sooner rather than later, where you have those links, you have that site you can direct people to. And I think just the last thing is building your brand as a journalist can also be something that you start sooner rather than later, with that presence on LinkedIn, making sure to, really bring visibility to the work that you're doing. Take the time to write those posts, whether it's for LinkedIn or other social media, and share out what you're working on, because that's one thing, journalists, this comes up with Sember Media a lot too. Journalists are at telling other people's stories, but when it comes to telling their own story, sometimes they don't give that as much attention as they probably should. So I've done classes on how to write the About Us page of your digital portfolio, your website. Just really take the time to tell your own story on your social media and build your own brand so people can get to know your work.
I had that on my list of things to talk with you about, and I'd forgotten. So I'm glad you reminded me.
Yeah, wonderful.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I know you're very busy, way busier than I am. So so it's been a pleasure to talk with you again, Natalie. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Okay. Bye now.